Let us pray. Our Divine Father, as we conclude for this week our work in this assembly, we renew our thanks and ask that we may continue our work under your guidance. Amen.
Introduction of visitors. Presenting petitions.
To present the following petitions that have been received for private bills. 1. The petition of Reverend J. Robert Jacobson, Reverend Dan Berg, Reverend Philip Hink, Reverend Alan Holm, Reverend Laverne Hovland, Reverend Lothar Schwab, and Reverend Glenn Stengel for the Alberta Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Canada Act. 2. The petition of Reverend Marvin Daima, Reverend Wally Reel, Reverend Robert Johnson, Reverend Jack Keys, and Jerry Walters for the Northwest Bible College Act. 3. The petition of Stephen S. Singer, Walter C. Barron QC, Robert James Sinclair Gibson, Donald Douglas, and William Pressey for the Oxford Trust Company Limited Act. 4. The petition of the Municipal District of Rocky View number 44 for the Canada Olympic Park Property Tax Exemption Act. 5. The petition of Roy Louie, Muriel Stanley Venn, and Rufus Goodstriker for the Alberta Native Business Summit Foundation Act. 6. The petition of Timothy Z. Marshall for the Timothy Z. Marshall Bard Mission Act. 7. The petition of the Calgary Research and Development Authority for the Calgary Research and Development Authority Amendment Act 1986. 8. The petition of the City of Edmonton and Northwestern Utilities Limited for the City of Edmonton and Northwestern Utilities Limited Agreement Act 1986. 9. The petition of the Lethbridge General and Auxiliary Hospital and Nursing Home District Number 65 for the Galt Scholarship Fund Act. 10. The petition of Merrick Henry Kupik for the Joanna Olivia Kupik and Agnieszka Jennifer Kupik Adoption Act. 11. The petition of Jerry Sellinger, Jim Leonard, John Edwards, and Don Patterson for the McMahon Youth Service Foundation Act. 12. The petition of St. John's Institute for the St. John's Institute Amendment Act 1986. 13. The petition of the Institute of Management Consultants of Alberta for the Certified Management Consultants Act. And 14. The petition of Most Reverend Bishop Paul J. O'Byrne, William D. Dickey QC, the Honorable Frank H. Quigley, Roy A. Farron, and Yolande Gagnon for the St. Mary's College Act.
Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Notices of motions. Introduction of bills. Tabling returns and reports.
Mr. Speaker, I table, as required, the financial statements of the Alberta General Insurance Company for the period ended December 31st, 1985. Mr. Speaker, I also wish to file with the Assembly, and all members will receive a copy of an outline of the U.S. countervailing duties investigation of certain softwood lumber products from Canada, with a procedure and timetable attached thereto, as I indicated I would do in answer to a question to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition in the Assembly.
Introduction of special guests. Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct my first question to the Solicitor General. It follows upon his decision a few weeks ago that the ALCB will no longer seek the procurement of liquor products from South Africa. I wonder if the Minister would advise the members if it will now be the government policy to follow the lead set by Manitoba and donate the profits from the sale of existing stocks of South African liquor to charities, particularly anti-apartheid groups.
It's the first time I've ever been applauded for standing up. Mr. Speaker, Alberta has always been recognized as being a leader and not a follower, and the decision of Manitoba is in their own jurisdiction.
Mr. Speaker, I wonder then if the Solicitor General would outline just what it is that the government plans to do with the profits from the sale of the existing stocks of South African liquor. Just as usual then?
Mr. Speaker, the profits from the Liquor Control Board operations are normally put into the general revenue of the province, and that will be the normal procedure.
Well, thank you. I wonder if I could ask a supplementary question then to the Minister of Economic Development and Trade, Mr. Speaker. Could the Minister advise what steps the Alberta government has taken to discourage, to discourage the export of sulphur products from Alberta to South Africa?
Mr. Speaker, earlier in the question period, the Minister of Federal and Intergovernmental Affairs described to members of the Assembly the position that had been taken by the Federal Minister of External Affairs and the request that had been conveyed to the province of Alberta, with which we concurred. And that's the action that we have followed upon the request of the Minister of External Affairs.
A final supplementary, Mr. Speaker. I wonder then if the Minister for Economic Development is prepared to meet with the Alberta producers of sulphur to discuss the possibility of a voluntary suspension of exports to that apartheid regime.
Mr. Speaker, over the course of the weeks ahead, and of course in the last few weeks, I've met with representatives of a number of sectors of the Alberta economy, and I suspect in the weeks ahead I will be meeting with key producers of sulphur. That's an important export commodity for the province of Alberta, and we are a major exporter to many countries of the world. But at this stage, we have no intention of interfering with the private sector and their trading anywhere in the world. There are a number of countries with which individual members may disagree with their internal policies, but our position as a provincial government has been not to interfere in the external affairs policy of this government, but we will respond as appropriate to federal initiatives that relate to external affairs. My colleague, the Minister of Federal and Intergovernmental Affairs, may wish to supplement my answer.
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Minister of Economic Development and Trade has indeed put the situation that we have followed as a government relative to international trade matters, and it has been the position of the government of Alberta to consult closely with the federal government on all matters relating to both import and export policy, and that is particularly important now in view of the role that we are playing relative to the multinational trade negotiations and the bilateral trade negotiations with the United States, and we would intend to follow that long-standing policy with respect to this as other matters that will come forward in due course, and as I expect they will over time.
Second question, House Leader, New Democrat.
To the Minister, is the government then considering any other moves, either in consultation with the federal government or moves with the private sector regarding imports or exports to South Africa to show our displeasure with the continuing apartheid policy?
Mr. Speaker, I think that the answer to that question is contained in the earlier responses, not just today, but earlier in question period, with respect to how the province responds to policy matters that are the responsibility of the federal government. One of the questions I think all of us need to bear in mind is what are the consequences of trade with other countries in terms of the impact on the people who live in those countries. And that, of course, is a matter that always is considered by the external affairs people when making decisions with respect to our trading relationships with other nations.
Second question, House Leader, Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, for the second question this morning, I'd like to ask the minister responsible for the Women's Secretariat if he can explain, in the absence of a legislative authority for the Women's Secretariat or the kind of Council on Women's Affairs, under what authority does this outfit operate? Lease space, purchase furniture, hire staff, etc. Could he explain, please?
Mr. Speaker, could the honourable member clarify if she's talking about the Secretariat or the Advisory Council? Thank you. With respect to the Advisory Council, the government established its commitment and made it clear by appointing an individual who would act as chairperson of that advisory council, and by allowing for initial expenditure, rental of an office space, and so on. It's the intention of the government to introduce legislation in this session that we'll have an opportunity to discuss, which will precede any further moves in terms of appointments to that council.
Well, thank you. I wonder then if, in the absence of this legislation, I see it's not on the order paper yet, if the minister could outline what the current goals of this Phantom Council are at this point.
Mr. Speaker, those goals will be discussed at length, I'm sure, by the honourable member opposite and others when the legislation is introduced into the House. Clearly, the government has a commitment to establishing a council which will include women from across the province and which will advise us on issues of importance to women in Alberta. Further debate of that issue, though, I would suggest should await the legislation and when it comes into the House.
Forward to it, Mr. Speaker. I wonder then if the minister would just elaborate a bit further, and you know, I don't want to prejudice the outcome of the legislation, but would he advise if that council currently has authority or some form of mandate to pursue means by which women can achieve equality in Alberta?
Clearly, Mr. Speaker, because there isn't a council established by this House or by order in council, there is not a body that has that authority under that name. The Women's Secretariat, which has long-standing interest in that area and a mandate to advise and to do research, does in fact assist in that regard. However, the current chairperson of the council does have authority by contract to the government to discuss with women's organizations throughout the province what issues will be of importance once that council is fully established. Also to discuss with them the fact that the intent of the government is to establish such a council, and to give us feedback on what indeed we need to consider in terms of introducing that legislation. I might add, Mr. Speaker, that I've enjoyed having the opportunity in recent weeks to talk to a cross-section of women throughout Alberta, meet with them, and discuss by telephone their opinions as to what should be included in that council, what should be included in the legislation, and I look forward to discussing the results of those meetings with members of the legislature.
I wonder then if the minister would advise whether or not this pre-council that doesn't really have a mandate at least enjoys, for now, an arm's-length distance relationship from the government, please?
Well, Mr. Speaker, arm's-length distant relationships are hard to define at best. The chairperson, elect, I suppose, of the council, has the opportunity to discuss the council and what it should entail with women throughout Alberta, as I previously indicated. In terms of other responsibilities, those will await the legislation.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister. Will the Minister undertake to this Assembly to introduce a separate bill on the Women's Advisory Council that is separate from the Women's Secretariat Act?
Mr. Speaker, that's one possibility that I'm giving consideration to, and I'm looking forward to discussing with my government colleagues. The member will have to await the introduction, though, to see if, in fact, that's the direction we proceed.
Honourable House Leader, Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Labour. Mr. Minister, a minister of the government has said that the unemployment rate in Alberta is higher than 10.7. Does the Minister of Labour have any idea what the current employment rate in Alberta truly is?
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to not hear. I'm not the acting Minister of Employment and Manpower, but I will take the question under advisement on behalf of that minister who's responsible for it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Minister, perhaps you'd like to try this one. In view of the fact that in Ontario unemployment is at 7%, minimum wage at $4.35. In BC, the situation is reversed. Unemployment is high and the minimum wage is low. Does the Minister of Labour have any studies that give evidence that raising the minimum wage would be a direct cause of increased unemployment?
Not within the department, I don't think, but we can check with the statistics from Statistics Canada about the various provinces.
Well, Mr. Speaker, perhaps if the Minister of Labour can't answer these questions, perhaps the Premier would like to try them. Mr. Premier, the Minister of Manpower has indicated he won't consider raising the minimum wage until the unemployment rate drops to 4%. Can the Premier give this House and the people of Alberta an indication of the government's plans, targets, and timing to reach such an objective?
Mr. Speaker, the matter of the minimum wage is something that's reviewed annually, even more often than that, because it is a matter that's important to the province and the people of the province. In terms of working to lower the unemployment rate, obviously the government is concerned with that and working very hard in that direction. The honourable member might know that in this budget and in our throne speech we have initiated the largest job creation effort in the history of Alberta. It's an indication of our concern for unemployment that is caused to a great extent by factors beyond our control. Nevertheless, we have taken on the responsibility to try to do everything possible to find employment for the people of Alberta. We are doing that in a variety of ways. We're doing it in the area of training and retraining. We're doing it with the largest capital budget in history of $2.8 billion. One only has to travel in Edmonton these days and in other cities and towns to see construction that is going on in roads and potholes and expansions. This is the capital budget working, providing jobs. We are doing it by strengthening the agriculture industry. We are doing it by strengthening the energy industry. We are doing it with the municipal job creation program of $500 million to municipalities. We are doing it with our tourism projects. Mr. Speaker, we are doing it in a variety of ways, probably ways that are better discussed other than in the question period, but I think it should be clear to every member in the House and the people of Alberta, the largest job creation effort in history is currently underway.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Premier, it's not working. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Premier, do you have in the government statistics as to the numbers and types of employment of those people in our province who are presently working at $3.80 an hour?
Mr. Speaker, it's quite possible that the Minister of Manpower would have that information, and when he's back in the House, I'm sure we'll ask him to see if the department has it, and he can provide it to the members of the legislature.
Supplementary, Member St. Albert.
Supplementary to the Premier, Mr. Speaker. The Premier, in his response, indicated to us in this Assembly that we in Alberta are going on a massive job creation program, that it's the biggest effort in Alberta's history.
Honourable member, come to the question, please.
Mr. Speaker, my question to the Premier is, where are those jobs being created?
Mr. Speaker, I guess I've started to explain it to the honourable member, and he wasn't listening because I responded to the member for Gold Bar. The jobs are being created first in the strengthening of our agriculture industry. The efforts of the government to assist with agriculture, with the $2 billion of assistance there, with the other programs that have been put in place by the Department of Agriculture. We are assisting with $600 million in the energy industry. That is creating jobs. Well, listen, you ask the question, you don't want to hear the answer, then don't ask the question. Mr. Speaker, there's $600 million in the energy industry. That comes in the way of royalty relief, that comes in the way of exploration drilling assistance, it comes in the way of industry activity. And Mr. Speaker, there's the $750 million for small business. Small business is the engine of employment in this province. Again, we'll be creating jobs there. As I said, it's in the largest capital budget, work in parks, work in irrigation, dams, streets, paving, buildings, all these things. Then there's the assistance to the municipalities, $500 million. Mr. Speaker, this is the largest job creation effort in the history of Alberta. I've only touched on half of them. There's the assistance for the magnesium plant. There's the assistance for the pulp and paper plant. There's a laser disc plant, considering for Grand Prairie. There's a variety of ways in which this government is working. There's a new emphasis on tourism. There's a new emphasis in forestry. We are considering in the Hinton area a major expansion of that operation in forestry. All of these matters, Mr. Speaker, the government is dealing with in providing jobs for Albertans. Now, it's true that there are factors beyond our control which we are unable to shut off, but nevertheless, we are working in the largest job creation effort in the history of this province for the people of Alberta.
Honourable Leader, Representative Party.
Mr. Speaker, my questions are to the Minister of Environment, and they're in follow-up to my questions on Bow Valley Resources and the agreement that may be signed between them and the Alberta Special Waste Management Corporation. The seemingly sweetheart deal, I think, has to be explained in this legislature. The Minister answered some questions yesterday in terms of 15.3, but I'd like to ask a question on Section 15.4 of the agreement, and for further clarification. To the Minister, can Bow Valley Resources use its ownership position in the joint venture as collateral with which to obtain the loan for their portion of the agreement?
Mr. Speaker, excuse me, I thought I'd responded to that question yesterday. Quite frankly, Bow Valley Resources Services cannot do that without the approval of the other partner in the joint venture, which is the Alberta Special Waste Management Corporation, and without the approval of the Government of Alberta.
Supplementary question to the Minister. Could the Minister indicate at this time whether the government is prepared to give that approval to Bow Valley Resources so that they can use their portion as collateral?
Mr. Speaker, at this point in time, we are certainly not prepared to do that. We're talking about a joint venture agreement that is just beginning to be established, written into the joint venture agreement as well, and the Memorandum of Understanding is a review that will take place in 3 years in 1989, and at that point in time, the Memorandum of Understanding provides for some certain steps that can be taken if the government is not satisfied with what is happening, including a buyout of Bow Valley.
Speaker, supplementary question to the Minister. Could the Minister indicate that a total review is being taken with regards to the financial position of Bow Valley Resources, and is the Minister satisfied at this time that their financial position is adequate to take on their responsibilities in the agreement without default?
Mr. Speaker, that review has been ongoing, and I have been advised by the Board of Directors of the Alberta Special Waste Management Corporation that they are satisfied with the financial position of Bow Valley Resources.
The final supplementary question for today. Could the Minister indicate what position we are in at the present time with regards to that agreement? When the Memorandum of Agreement was signed, I understand that March 31st, 1986 was to be the finalization of the agreement. At this point in time, is there another set date for final agreement date? And if there is not a date established at this time, what problems are being encountered in terms of delay in the agreement?
Mr. Speaker, when the Memorandum of Understanding was signed in March of 1986, I recall that there was a date given in March 31, 1986 to bring the whole matter to fruition. I do not believe that there are any major problems that are holding anything up other than the normal dotting of the I's and the crossing of the T's, and the request that I have made as the new Minister of the Environment to have an opportunity to review clause by clause the whole agreement and to satisfy in my own mind that it's in the best interest of the people of Alberta.
Supplementary, Honourable Member Edmonton-Glengarry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In view of the one-word answer I was given yesterday, I would like to ask the Minister if he can outline exactly which provision in the interim agreement requires that BVRS uses money it receives from the government to run the Chem Securities plant rather than to service its own rather frighteningly high debt load, and that if there is no such provision, can he assure us that a provision will be put in the agreement before it is finally signed?
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the opportunity to respond further to the question raised by the Edmonton from Glengarry the other day. My short response yesterday was caveated on the basis of instruction given by the Chair to be brief in providing responses to questions, but I'd be very, very pleased now to take an opportunity to answer specifically the question from the member from Edmonton Glengarry. And perhaps it should be noted this way, Mr. Speaker, perhaps, with your indulgence, sir, perhaps I could take just a bit of time to explain the relationship.
Well, I hate to interrupt the Honourable Minister, but in fairness to the House, there are quite a list of members requesting permission to ask questions. So I would ask the Minister to be reasonably brief.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate that. I will be reasonably brief. I feel that I'm being whipshod here. One day it's to be brief, the other day it's to provide more information. Essentially what we have now existing in the province of Alberta is an instrument that will lead us to a cleanup of the environment. And we are the leaders anywhere in North America with respect to this particular proposal. We have set up a Crown corporation called the Alberta Special Waste Management Corporation. We have then gone out in a public environment and asked people to provide submissions to us as to what kind of plan should be put in place. A decision has been made for the type of plant that will be put in place, Mr. Speaker. Agreement and decision has now been made that there will be something called a joint venture arrangement. 40% will be owned by the Alberta Special Waste Management Corporation, 60% by the proponent, in this case, Bow Valley Resource Services. Now, they will be the joint venture that will basically serve as the board of directors for the plant. There will be an agency that has now been selected to run the actual plant. That agency is called Chem Securities Limited, which is a wholly owned, Alberta-based subsidiary of Bow Valley Resource Services. Now, to be very, very specific as to how the thing will go, to ensure that there is not a deflection of dollars, Chem Securities Limited, and it's very, very clear in the Memorandum of Understanding, will build, supervise the building of, operate the plant at Swan Hills with no profit to itself. It will build it on a cost basis. Chem Security Services Limited will have no profit accrued to it in terms of the arrangement. If there is a profit, and it's unknown, Mr. Speaker, if there will be a profit generated from this, our concern is first and foremost with safety and improving the environment in the province of Alberta. We have in the agreement a 3-year period, a review period that will come in 1989, at which point in time the whole system will be reviewed. In terms of dollars that will be coming as a result of the operation of the plant, we don't know if there's going to be a profit at the moment. But the plant will be operated on this basis. Every 30 days, a submission will be brought forward to the joint venture by Chem Security Services saying it needs X amount of dollars to operate the plant for the next 30 days. Those dollars will be forthcoming from the two partners, Bow Valley Resource Services on the basis of 60%, Alberta Special Waste Management Corporation on the basis of 40%. Every 30 days, that will be adjudicated and adjusted.
Supplementary member Evans of Meadowlark.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Environment, who just stated that the Alberta Special Waste Management Corporation was established in order to clean up the environment in the interests of Albertans, could the Minister please tell us why the chairman of that corporation, therefore the former chairman, was fired in December when he failed to recommend the proposed deal with Bow Valley Resource Services?
The chair has some difficulty with the question. The question's to a minister who was not responsible at that time for the administration of that department. If the minister wishes to respond, I suppose that's up to him.
Mr. Speaker, point of order, is the government not responsible for that decision, and could somebody please tell us that, if not now, maybe tomorrow or the next time the House sits?
Well, the minister has the current responsibility, and he can respond to the question if he wishes.
Mr. Speaker, the caveat you put on it is, of course, that I was not the minister at the time. It's not my understanding that the former chairman was fired. I understand that there was a parting of the ways. Now, I suppose one could have a debate on this whole question, and I'd be very, very pleased to get involved in such a debate. The former chairman is a man that I know very well and one who I have great respect for, but he is the former chairman.
Honourable member for Drumheller.
Speaker, my question is for the Honourable Minister of Agriculture. I'd like to ask the Honourable Gentleman whether he's received any requests for financial assistance from pork producers as a result of the current industrial dispute.
Mr. Speaker, in responding to the Honourable Member from Drumheller, may I indicate to him on June the 9th we received a letter from the manager, Mr. Ed Schultz of the Alberta Pork Producers Marketing Board, offering to us the suggestion of hardship that our pork producers are presently under during this industrial dispute. And I should indicate, as I'm sure the House would wish me to commend the Pork Producers Board on doing a superb job in moving our hogs during this difficult time that they have experienced.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, could the Honourable Minister tell us what his response was to the request for assistance?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I responded to them on the 25th of June, indicating that I was deeply concerned that a precedent would be set whereby we would involve ourselves in favor of one party as it related to the industrial dispute when there were a number of parties that were hurt by it. I also indicated to him a deep concern I had whereby it could be interpreted as top-loading under our red meat stabilization program. And in addition to that, it could activate some type of countervail measures. So I indicated to him that I had deep reservations about offering any type of support in that area.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, has the minister made any other assistance or granted any other assistance to the pork producers, if not in that area?
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to indicate to the House that in previous years the government has been very active in supporting the pork industry, whereby there was a $10 million payout to the Pork Producers Marketing Insurance Plan, a $10 million payout under the loan guarantee, a $5.7 million debt retirement for Fletchers. In addition to those very worthwhile payouts, we have a number of agricultural programs as it relates to farm fuels, the feed market adjustment program, which all have a substantial impact for our pork producers.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Labour, in view of the impact that the long-awaited decisions of the Board of Inquiry has on this situation that hog producers find themselves in, can he indicate to us that no further extensions will be granted to this board so that we can at least have some recommendations?
Mr. Speaker, I can't give an absolute guarantee because it would depend upon the reasons that the chairman gave for requesting another extension, if indeed he did. So that it is to some extent hypothetical. My understanding is that the chairman is anticipating delivering a report sometime in the next week.
Honourable Member Edmonton Kingsway, followed by the Honourable Member for Edmonton Meadowlark.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Treasurer. Why did the Treasurer's officials issue a provisional certificate of eligibility from the Alberta Stock Savings Plan to Enviro Waste Corporation for a hazardous waste disposal facility, given that the government's policy that the Swan Hills plant is to have a monopoly on waste disposal in this province?
Mr. Speaker, there seems to be two different questions there, which to some extent begs debate. I will attempt, however, to deal with the responsibilities I have. That is, that in providing the certificate of eligibility, we followed up on our commitment given by the previous provincial treasurer to recognize all companies filing on the Alberta Stock Savings Plan subject to the introduced legislation. As I've indicated before, as long as the company satisfied the test as spelled out in that legislation, a certificate would be issued.
Mr. Speaker. This company would rather locate in Calgary than Kamloops, but yet by the policy of the Environment Department may end up having to locate outside of Alberta. If the Enviro Waste project is meant to operate in Kamloops then, and hence will have its greatest employment impact in BC, why has it been issued a certificate of provisional eligibility with Alberta tax dollars?
Once again, Mr. Speaker, we seem to be going through this issue of why is it the government has introduced the Alberta Stock Savings Plans, what kind of tests of Alberta presence will be used in the previous legislation and in the current legislation. And of course, I've already stated in many cases that we intend to strengthen the financial sector of this province, and we're doing it in a variety of ways. Following up on the response to the Enhancing the Alberta Capital Markets paper, we have brought forward a series of initiatives to satisfy that particular point. And many of my colleagues, including the Minister of Economic Development last night, outlined that. We are of the belief that if we do strengthen the Alberta capital markets by using such things as the Alberta Stock Savings Plan, that there will be jobs generated here. We'll develop a financial market around using the tax levers which are available to us and strengthen the Alberta Stock Savings Plan and the Alberta Stock Exchange itself. The decision as to where the money will be made obviously will come back to Alberta in the longer term, and it's no question that in the near term the honourable member can pick and choose examples which show that some of the money will be spent outside of Alberta. We admit to that and we agree to that. But we cannot balkanize this country. We cannot build boundaries around this province to prevent the free flow of capital. We're a private sector government. We believe the private sector should make those decisions and it should not be dictated to by some arbitrary government agency.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. In view of the fact that this company would rather have located in Calgary, did the Treasurer's officials in any way communicate with the Department of the Environment or the Special Waste Management Corporation before issuing that certificate?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I try to deal with detail in my job as much as possible, but when it comes to recounting communications between various officials and between various departments, I have to admit I can't give full details of those discussions.
Final supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Given that it seems like the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, or the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing here, but anyway, can the Minister assure the Assembly that it is in fact the policy of this government that hazardous waste will only be disposed of at the Swan Hills facility, notwithstanding the certificate of Enviro Waste?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure when the Minister of Technology and Research goes on to explain the importance of technology and the technology transfer and the fact that we're encouraging a technology sector to develop in this province, looking for new ideas, trying to encourage the intellectual power of this province to create new ways in which we can deal with some of the problems facing us in this province. But we will go on to talk about other avenues of opportunity for us. We would not foreclose and not take a one-sided view, as the member is suggesting, to prevent new ideas from being formulated and supported in this province.
Mr. Speaker, perhaps could I supplement the response given by my honourable colleague? I think what's really important here, Mr. Speaker, to understand that the firm in question will manufacture a plant in the province of Alberta using initiatives brought forward by the government of Alberta. The jobs will be created in this province. The plant will physically be moved to another province for the operation. The key aspect of this is Alberta is now using its brain power and taxation policies to create jobs, manufacturing jobs in this province. The second point, Mr. Speaker, which is really important, there's absolutely nothing put forward by any memorandum of understanding or any aspect dealing with the Alberta Special Waste Management Corporation which precludes the establishment of a recycling plant in this province. And in fact, the memorandum of understanding and agreement is very, very clear. And the honourable member should understand and appreciate that we have going on right now in 1986 in this province very important public hearings being conducted by the Environment Council of Alberta to in fact reach the point that my honourable colleague, the Provincial Treasurer, has brought forward with respect to new ideas in this province.
Supplementary, Evans and Meadowlark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Provincial Treasurer, who's making a great deal about the importance of not inhibiting the free flow of capital amongst and between provinces, could he please indicate to the House how it is that we are limited to 25% restriction on Alberta wages and salaries under the Alberta Stock Savings Plan. However, under the Small Business Equity Corporation, investments have to go to Alberta firms that pay 75% of their wages to Albertans, and in fact, under the SBEC program, there's still a 30% tax credit.
Order, please. The Chair is having some difficulty with the question. My understanding is Bill number 11, the Stock Savings Plan, is on votes and proceedings and is yet to be introduced. The Chair has some difficulty with members asking questions about proposed legislation when it hasn't even had first reading. However, bearing in mind the newness of my position this morning and the Honourable Provincial Treasurer, I would assume that I would ask the Provincial Treasurer to make his decision whether he wishes to respond.
Mr. Speaker, I'm just waiting for the member from Meadowlark to get up. He looks pretty anxious this morning to appeal to some particular piece of legislation which has not yet been introduced in this House. Mr. Speaker, I can only say that we have listened to a variety of people, and then today, as a matter of fact, I'll be meeting with more people to seek advice on how to deal with the Alberta presence. And when that legislation comes forward, I'm sure there'll be an opportunity to debate his view, the anti-private sector view, and the government's view.
Point of order. Point of order. There is an urgency to this, Mr. Speaker, because, in fact, the Alberta Stock Savings Plan is being advertised with its 25% restriction in a Globe and Mail insert this week. My further question? My set of questions. Thank you very much. To the
Honourable Member for Evans and Meadowlark.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Technology, Research and Telecommunications, government intrusion into the economy can constitute unfair competition with the private sector and can limit private sector development opportunities. Could the Minister please explain to the members of this legislature why Altel Data, a government agency, is competing with the private sector in the business and personal computer market?
Mr. Speaker, the role of Alberta Government Telephones, which is the owner of Altel Data, is to, besides providing a quality communications network at the lowest possible cost, is also to provide thrusts in terms of developments. And there is competition, I would readily acknowledge, as the honourable member has suggested. But I think a far more important side of Altel Data is, in fact, the thrust into new areas that it is undertaking and provision of services which weren't otherwise available. The honourable member raises a question indirectly in his question, which I'm sure that the Assembly will at some point want to be providing me some additional advice on, and I would look forward to that.
Supplemental, I'm certain that the many private sector computer retail outlets will be interested in knowing that the important side of Altel Data is not that it sells computers against them. Could the minister please tell this legislature why AGT is competing with the private sector in the sale of intercom systems to schools?
Mr. Speaker, the intercoms are part of the total communications network, and that is a function of Alberta government telephones. The honourable member has raised a question. Would you like to hear my answer? The honourable member, Mr. Speaker, has raised a question about the extent of competition on what is known as the subscriber components end of the telecommunications system, and that is a fair question to raise. It is a practice in every jurisdiction of every telephone company with which I'm familiar that there is competition by the telephone company with the private sector, and this has been a rapidly developing area in terms of private sector competition, and I think that's healthy. It does, however, at some point raise a question of what is the role of the telephone company in terms of it being a publicly owned utility. But that's a different question, and I see no problem at the present time with the fact that there is some competition. I don't know how we could expect the development of technology at the rapid pace which it has proceeded to this point without observing some of the competition to which the honourable member alludes.
Mr. Speaker, in fact, the intercom system in school systems is a separate specification in a tender. To the Minister of Economic Development, is he aware that the word processing equipment for legislature offices in this legislature is being purchased through a company in Boulder, Colorado?
Mr. Speaker, I would want to point out to the honourable member that in fact some of the developments in telecommunications technology today are such that the system that is provided to a business or a user, subscriber, for internal use is, as a part of the service now, directly tied into the switching mechanisms in a location quite far removed from that business. It is one facet of the services that are being provided. And I draw that to the honourable member's attention because I think his understanding, Mr. Speaker, is somewhat incomplete in that respect.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Technology, Research and Telecommunications. Could he confirm that it's this government's mandate to provide services that are already being provided by the private sector, and in fact to compete directly with the private sector with the risk of hampering private sector development in at least the important area of high tech?
Mr. Speaker, in a very few minutes, I think we're about to engage upon a review of the estimates which will provide for what I hope will be a very helpful debate from my point of view and from the point of view of all members of the legislature on the role of government with respect to the promotion of high technology and the very important jobs and entrepreneurial developments that go with it. And I underline the importance of jobs which can come out of high technology and the quality, Mr. Speaker, of those jobs. I think those are objectives to which every member of this Assembly should be and is hopefully dedicated.
Honourable member for Stadler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is directed to the Honourable Minister of the Environment with regard to the proposal by Bradbury Chemicals to construct a PCP plant in Alberta. Can the Minister tell us where this plant would be located?
Mr. Speaker, I think that question is rather hypothetical. At this point in time, no application has been made to Alberta Environment with respect to a request for a license to operate such a plant in this province.
The supplementary then, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister for Economic Development. In view of the potential business activity and employment benefits, has his department been approached by Bradbury Chemicals?
Mr. Speaker, yes, discussions have taken place between representatives of Bradbury Chemicals Limited and officials from the Department of Economic Development and Trade.
Orders of the day.